right now, as we are live, right now in downtown Portland, there is a set of rallies and a set of counter rallies in downtown Portland between basically right of center protesters and left of center protesters. And I think that at least one of the groups, right of center, is the Proud Boys, and certainly one of the groups left of center is Black Lives Matter and Antifa. That's like two groups with tight correlation, and they are, right now meeting on the streets of Portland,
squaring off, which is something that they have done regularly. They effectively announce. One group announces that it will be there. The other group announces that it will show up, and things unfold from there. I should say I've attended one of these just to see what it looked like on both sides. And in general, it is a contained version of what is now uncontained in Portland.
But we'll hear about it. We'll find out. But I'll bet that today's events are not as contained. In part, this is one of the first times that the people from the right have declared in advance that they're going to show up for a while. Certainly, I think, I may be wrong about this, but certainly the first time maybe in this 80-plus days that the riots have been nightly in Portland, and maybe if they showed up, it was early in this. So on August 20th, today is the 22nd, so 2 days ago, we received an email from a viewer of this live stream who lives in North Portland, which is 2 blocks from the police union building on North Lombard that has been at the center of some of the protests and riots in Portland. So there's sort of 4 broad areas, not large areas, but sort of 4 buildings really that the protesters and then the rioters have targeted. And the police building on North Lombard in North Portland has been one of them. So this is a viewer who lives just a couple blocks from that building. And he said, yesterday, these pamphlets were placed on the front porches in my neighborhood. It's blatant propaganda, and some of the verbiage is disconcerting at best. So he included screenshots, or not screenshots, he took pictures and he showed us that. So we're going to show you these. Zach, would you show the first of those 4 pictures from the, and maybe just make it a little bigger so people can see it a little bit more. Okay, it's fine. Okay, so that's the cover. Next page. Somewhere on this, we can't read this, but somewhere on this it says, "Do not expect peace from the police, a fundamentally violent institution which functions to suppress effective social movements." That's a claim. Next page. Somewhere on this page it says, "Night after night, police respond with violent escalation regardless of protesters' actions." Another claim, I think unfounded. And final page, "How you can help. On the ground, you can leave water bottles out for protesters. You can provide verbal support from your homes. Most importantly, you could join us on the streets. There is strength in numbers. The more people there are out on the streets, the less likely it is that the cops will injure people." So just one more thing before I ask us to talk about this a little bit. Zach, if you would show the video that I asked you to show from North Portland last night.
Out of your house, into the street.
So that is by far not the most violent of the videos from the nighttime protests / riots. In fact, there is no real violence there, though you might understand there'd be a threat of violence. But what they're saying is out of your house and into the street, out of your house and into the street, which is, of course, quite not what they suggested in their pamphlet that they were distributing to exactly this neighborhood the day before. They were asking you to voice support from your house, which is itself an ask that is potentially a big one, because it would appear to be a kind of payment that you must give, whether or not you believe it. But the very next day, what the protesters, who might later become rioters, are doing is demanding that you not merely show support from the safety of your own home, but you get onto the streets with them.
So there's a trope built in here that were you to see it in a different context, everybody would get it 100%, which is the veiled threat.
Yeah.
It's not even a threat with plausible deniability. It's implausible deniability, where a threat is leveled, but it's done in a way that is unprovable. You can't tell for sure that it's a threat, not at the level that it would be required to prosecute somebody for it. But it's obviously a threat from the point of view of the person hearing it. And so, so out of your homes and into the streets, that's a demand. Mm-hmm. A demand being shouted by people shining very powerful lights into people's homes. Imagine you were at home and an angry crowd that is setting fires nightly in Portland is outside your house.
Breaking windows, breaking into buildings, police precincts,
night after night.
Mm-hmm.
And, you could report this as protesters marched through neighborhoods and, invited homeowners to join them.
I'm sure it's been reported that way.
I'm sure to the extent it's been reported at all. And I must say people around the world who we're in contact with have the sense that things are calming down in Portland. Right. I see no evidence of that.
Nope.
It's hard to know because the protests are so concentrated that it's not like the evidence is, we don't encounter it on the way to the market or the post office or whatever. But
we were assured things would calm down once the governor and the mayor negotiated that the feds would leave so long as state and local police came forward and started doing their jobs.
Right.
They're not being allowed to.
No. But the point is, okay, so that's a implausibly deniable threat. The shining of bright lights into people's windows, and the insistence that's on the cusp of deniability, right? Mm-hmm. Zach, could you show the one that I had, the similar looking video from one of the last couple of nights? Now this one, we cannot hear it. All right, you can stop it. So
what
that
are they
one,
saying?
Wake up, wake up, wake up, motherfucker, wake up.
Okay.
Right? Now, that doesn't sound like an invitation.
Not really.
Now, it could be a temporally inappropriate wake-up call. I mean, as long as we're doing plausible or implausible deniability.
Maybe they think the people of North Portland are nocturnal.
Right. Who knows? But the point is, that's very threatening stuff. It's threatening to anybody who sees it. A lot will rest on the fact that you're not likely to see that. If you are tuned into certain accounts on Twitter, you'll see it. You could subscribe to those accounts and you could see the stuff from every single night. Yep. Or
the few accounts that those videos are coming from have been described as unreliable because they report the same kind of story all the time. Right. As if reporting the same kind of story all the time itself makes you unreliable. When actually it's because we've got 86, 87 nights now of uninterrupted. And, I can't be certain of this, but I think that from the point that violence showed up late, it's been consistent every night. There's been at least some. Okay, you've got a situation in which if you're tuned into certain, let's say, for example, to the Portland subreddit. Mm-hmm. The Portland subreddit is quite consistent in reporting that peaceful protesters are out working hard and being attacked by police. As we would be led to believe by that pamphlet.
Right. So basically you've got two stories. They're completely incompatible with each other, mm-hmm. right? And one of them is just absolutely insistent on the fact that this is about racial injustice, that the demands are reasonable, that the response is unreasonable.
Well, and I mean, there's just a couple of tropes again, phrases even, that you see repeated over and over again that seem to have lodged themselves in people's brain and that are just very effective, mostly peaceful.
Yes.
The vast majority of the time, you can go and you don't see violence. And in this particular case, the fact that you can predict it based on time of night and, position of sun in the sky makes that an even less compelling argument than it would be otherwise. But who cares? Most war zones on, in an average moment don't look like there's much going on.
Right.
Actually, this is too far afield and won't won't land for people watching, but I used to make this point when I would teach animal behavior, and I had all these students streaming in. I love animals. I really want to watch animals do what they do. And I'd say, okay, I'm gonna, have you be in the field doing animal behavior, and you are going to recognize how boring most of it is, because for the most part, animals sit around doing nothing, just like humans do as animals, right? Think about your own last 24 hours or a week. How often were you doing the sort of thing that you would be excited to see an animal doing? And this, the moments. And for humans, maybe eating would count, because that would be, prey capture in a carnivore, but it would just be browsing if you're doing deer behavior. But, how often are they actually like having sex or engaging in territorial interactions or, feeding their chicks? It happens not very much. And so the vast majority of time is spent in this sort of, resting state, just like with these protests that become riots reliably.
So we have not talked about this in advance, but of course I was thinking the very same thing, and I did a few back of the envelope calculations.
Really?
Yeah. It turns out
I don't see an envelope.
World War I was 81% peaceful.
81.
Yeah.
Yeah.
World War II.
You got the receipts for that.
World War II was more than 85% peaceful. And here's the one that really blew my mind.
World War II was more peaceful than World War I.
It was more peaceful.
Amazing.
The presidential motorcade in Dallas in 1963 was 99.8% peaceful.
It's just that one moment.
Just a very brief moment of not peace.
Yeah.
So anyway, yes, these calculations about how peaceful something is can be very misleading if you're not paying attention to the objective, which actually is to wield power.
Well, and like I'm banging this drum all the time, but it's another form of enumeracy. Like, mostly peaceful. Mostly doesn't mean what you think it means there. It's doing a job that is rhetorical, that is political, that is achieving a goal. It's not actually describing something that is meaningful in the way that you think it is.
Yeah, it describes nothing. And it's obviously completely preposterous. It's a phony story here. And so, all right. The fact of us being unable to agree on the basic facts of what is taking place. If you're paying attention to the Portland subreddit, you get the sense that there are protesters who are under attack by the police, that's what's going on.
Sure.
If you're paying attention to Andy No or this account, BG on the Scene, who's been documenting these things.
That's where that first video was from.
Yeah,
So.
You have a very different impression. Now, the fact is, the Portland subreddit cannot marshal evidence that these protests are peaceful in light of the fact that what they do is fail to report the part that isn't peaceful. So that's not really...
It's verificationist.
It's verificationist. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, Andy No and BG on the Scene and these other accounts that have documented this have shown you evidence. Now, it is possible... And I'm not saying that these accounts do this. It is possible to misrepresent this as what is going on across Portland, which is not true.
Or
right?
to show evidence of rioters being violent and not to show evidence of police being violent. That is certainly a way that that those videos could be cherry picked to create a narrative that is not true.
Right. It could be cherry picked. On the other hand, there's certain stuff here that's just completely unambiguous. And if you have done what we've done, which is check in on what's going on in Portland, it's very clear what's going on. You have a peaceful protest that precedes a riot. The riot is reliable. It involves arson. It now involves harassing people in their own homes. It involves breaking and entering. Let's see, Zach, do you want to put up the fire? So we have nightly fires. This one, I believe, is from last night. Again, this is VG on the Scene. This is
What did that Lime scooter ever do to them?
Yes, this was falsely reported as a bird scooter. It has now been corrected to a Lime scooter.
Oh, I got it right.
You did get it.
Right.
You
yes.
nailed it.
That is some reporting on the ground right there.
Wow.
False reporting is the wrong kind of scooter.
Wrong brand of scooter.
Yeah.
But, I mean, here's the thing. Okay, these things are being lit on fire. Trash cans are repeatedly being lit on fire. This is actually releasing toxins into people's neighborhoods. This stuff actually gets breathed by people.
Sure. But what it's also doing is releasing pent-up energy. Right?
Well, sure.
And this, so the cover story is one that some of the people engaged in this behavior actually believe. And it is nearly impossible for people in the midst of such activities, especially emerging as they have after, I mean, at this point, the protests and riots have been going on for longer than the lockdowns did before they started, which is amazing. I remember when they started, it felt like, well, this is how the end of lockdown will reveal itself. It's like, no, we're still, still in Portland. We're still in, phase 1 or something of reopening, and, the schools are staying virtual and all of this. But people who are engaging this, and even most of the rest of us, cannot begin to fathom how much of this is about the manifestation of a mental health crisis. A mental health crisis that is only going to get worse. Here we are in the Northern Temperate Zone. And indeed, for those of you who aren't in the Pacific Northwest, who have this image of it being rainy all the time, we truly have the most beautiful summers on the planet. Brett and I have been, not all over the planet, but a lot of places. And there is no place else we'd rather be. July, August, September. It is gorgeous. This year has been a little bit weird, but in general, clear blue skies and 80 degrees and, going down to 50 at night and no humidity and just completely gorgeous. And it will become dark and cold and rainy and depressing soon. The days are getting shorter faster now than they have been. And the election is coming. What is this going to look like? The only thing that will keep the stuff going on in the streets in check is the fact that it will be harder for people to motivate to leave their homes when it's gross and cold outside. But this is peak beauty here in the Pacific Northwest. It does make it easiest to get out there, but it's also the moment when people are probably at their mental health peak in general in the year. And there's no end in sight to lockdowns, to virtual schooling, to being able to go back to live theater, live music, bars, clubs, hanging out in restaurants inside safely, hanging out at restaurants outside, is pretty safe. And I know some of the restaurants are open inside, but probably not safe. So what is going to happen? It is a toxic brew. You said, it's going to release toxins when they're setting fire to this stuff. Yes, It is. But it's also this release of energy that is not in and of itself healthy, but is also not fully released.
Yeah, we are headed for a calamity here. Zach, can you put up the public service announcement video?
It shouldn't be that way. Honestly, we should be getting paid because we're working so fucking hard. So donate to us. Make sure these things keep happening, and you keep coming out here and getting more angry every day because black people are still getting killed. Whether you see it on the news or not, black people are dead.
So in that video, the person making the announcement makes the claim, and it's very familiar to us from what happened at Evergreen. In fact, a lot of this is, and I've seen people comment on.
What is he saying?
She is saying that the protesters should be paid for what they're doing. And there's this sense, it's either a complete lie or it is a level of delusion that is almost inconceivable.